Hey, good afternoon for another installment of Ask a Candidate a Question, and we're working on that title to make it more punchy, more crunchy. So today is Thursday, 1 o'clock on May 10th, and I think it's the 10th, 11th installment of these. And so the reason why we do these again is to ensure that there's accessibility, and I realize people are at work, but there are always opportunities to watch these videos. We can try to keep them to 15 minutes, make them tight and concise. So part of this is accessibility, and so there is a big difference in how people are able to access their candidates, but also their elected officials, and this is a big part of it. So to make it very clear, our office address should not be a secret from any candidate, and ours is 15636 Manchester in Ellisville, Missouri. So right near Representative Ann Wagner's backyard. So she's in Baldwin, which is just a stone's throw away from here. We are very appropriately right next to a pizza shop, which has the best calzones, honestly, that I've ever had in my life. I've gained 5 pounds, but it's been worth every bit of it. We're also right next door to a butcher shop, which is all too appropriate. I'm going to see if I can hopefully ask them to make a specific or a special kind of sausage for us called political sausage. Haha. So you can actually see how the sausage is made, but have it. Trust me, it'll be good if we can pull that off. So a lot of stuff happening as always this week. It is a whirlwind per usual, and so just as soon as we get kind of a slight handle on what's going on as far as the Iran deal and all the implications from that, today is North Korea. And so I have no doubt that this is a purposeful move and smart and strategic on behalf of the Trump administration to basically no one can get their footing on anything. And so these are monumental and extremely important things that are going on right now, and that really the American people don't have any time to react to, because as soon as there's one issue, another one pops up right away. So we'll start off with talking about Iran and the deal and what that is and what it means, or what it was potentially, which is also known as the JCPOA, if you want to look it up. But also talking about Oliver North, and something that I'm pretty surprised that no other, to my knowledge, pundit or news source has kind of been capitalizing on. I've been maybe mistaken on that, but I haven't seen anything. So we'll start off with Oliver North. Oliver North got in a bit of trouble in the 80s with the Iran-Contra deal, which wasn't good, and that was under the Reagan administration. So Oliver North at the time was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Marine Corps. So that's an officer. And lieutenant colonel, that's an 05. O means officer, 5 means the number of promotions that you've had. 1, you come in as a second lieutenant in the Army and Marine Corps. 5, you go all the way up, and it goes to lieutenant colonel. But 6 is colonel. 06 is colonel, so we call it a full bird. That's the same in the Air Force. In the Coast Guard and the Navy, it's a captain, but then it goes up to general. So there's 4 levels of general. So all I'm saying is it is very impressive and startling that a lieutenant colonel had such access and could cause such potential damage to the United States as he did. So that was basically overturned. He was essentially kind of let go from that. He was found responsible, but then it kind of got less and less severe, his punishment thereafter. So since then, Oliver North has been kind of doing a lot of talk show circuit, and he had, I think, War Stories with Oliver North. I think those on Fox News. I can't be certain, but he was there. Anyway, now he's the new head of the NRA. So that's one category. So Oliver North, found guilty for his role and his part in the Iran-Contra deal in the 80s under the Reagan administration, is now the head of the NRA. And some people might say, so what? Well, here's the so what. The same week that happened, this week, President Trump has actively and now removed the United States from the agreement that we signed and we agreed to under President Obama. So on the face of it, there are certain concerns that come from that immediately. One, what is our word worth internationally to the international community if we do not uphold or we do not stay in agreement that we signed? And so some of these things, of course, there's going to be changes and transitions between different presidential administrations, whether the Democrat or Republican, or how far left or how far right. But the fact that we are withdrawing out of this is awful. So what I want to say concisely is, and hello, Jessica Schober. Hopefully I pronounced that name right. So what I want to say concisely is, if you think about it, if you take one step back, we have an individual, a man who is found guilty of his responsibility in the Iran-Contra deal in the 80s, Iran again, And we have a president who has now taken us out of the JCPOA, better known as the Iran deal. So I don't think that's a coincidence. So what is that message that we're sending to the rest of the world, to the global community? That we have a person who's found guilty for his role in the Iran-Contra deal, and we have a president who's withdrawing us out of the Iran nuclear deal / JCPOA. So here's the background, a very quick synopsis on the JCPOA. Iran was a major concern for the United States and other nations for their role and their capability to develop and possibly implement or sell or continue to improve on their nuclear program, specifically not so much bombs but missiles. That's the typical way that this type of weapon would be implemented. So it's no longer going to be like from the Enola Gay. So we think of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 against Japan. Those were bombs that were dropped. Now it's typically going to be delivered by a warhead. And so there are different kinds of missiles, short range, medium range, and long range. And so ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, is the one that most people, if you've heard of it, probably the one that most people have heard. Right now, North Korea has been developing them, and we've known that. And our concern was that Iran was as well. So what the JCPOA did, what the Iran nuclear deal did, was essentially stunt and end their development of a nuclear weapon that could be launched via a missile. So they were developing technology, or trying to, that we feared could either reach us or more likely an ally that we had in the region or in Europe, or so insofar as Eastern or Western Europe. So that was our concern. So through a lot of work, a lot of diplomacy, and again, diplomacy is not soft power. I know it's called, but it's truly strong power. And if the right diplomatic actions can prevent and end wars and also conflicts going forward. So it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So what the JCPOA did was a lot of things, one of which was to allow unfettered access for the international community to have access to Iran's sites, essentially. So there are various sites and various stages of completion, various stages of complexity that Iran had and was working on. We knew it, that they were trying to push forward, that were, one, going to cease and stop. Two, they were going to consolidate the technology, the energy that they had, whether it was enriched uranium, plutonium, and they were going to consolidate into a certain number of spots that were going to be two things. One, under constant 24-hour video surveillance. And if anybody out there is kind of a conspiracy person, if you think of the movie Speed, where Keanu Reeves, they kind of tricked that guy and the bus to kind of play the same video loop over and over. So that's one concern, but there was 24-hour video footage or access to those sites. The second thing is unfettered access by the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Association, to, at the drop of a hat, go and evaluate and check out those sites. So to be clear, it's very, very difficult to hide this type of technology. So I know people might be concerned about dirty bombs, etc., but it's very difficult to hide and to conceal nuclear technology. It's just very, very difficult. So what Iran did was say, okay, we're going to stop. We're going to allow constant video surveillance, 24-hour video surveillance, and allow the IAEA, again, the International Atomic Energy Association, unfettered access at the drop of a hat without warning to check out these sites if there was something that was, a hot spot that we were evaluating via satellites or our spy planes that we could go check out. We could call our friends in Europe or elsewhere and say, hey, can you go check this out? So one concern that some people have, maybe on the right or other people who aren't as spun up on this, is that, well, why was there a deadline? I think it was 15 years, but why was there a termination point to this agreement? And that's a good question. But if you think about it, if we take one agnostic or unemotional step back, how many agreements would any of us be willing to agree to or engage in that are without end? So think of it, if you're going to buy a house, rent a house, get an apartment, rent an apartment, lease a car, buy a car, rent a car, how many of those things would we willingly and knowingly sign to say forever? Not many, right? And so if we're stunting and prohibiting the growth or the acceleration of Iran to have access to nuclear weapons technology, that's a tremendous, tremendous thing. I truly do think, and if you read it, if you go through it, which I'll be honest, Representative Ann Wagner has not read it. She does not understand it. If she's read it, she certainly doesn't understand it. So a lot of this is fear mongering. So that's one thing. And I can say with certainty, President Trump does not know what this is, and he does not understand it. And I say that respectfully, but he doesn't get it. He doesn't know. So this is a tremendous step backward for the United States. We had unfettered access. We could go check it out, do anything we wanted to make sure that Iran was in check. Furthermore, not all these things are terrible. Some of this technology that Iran was pursuing, I didn't know this, but some of it's used in X-rays. So X-ray technology. Some of their centrifuges, I have to get into the specifics of it again, but some of the centrifuges they had were from 1974. So, and part of the agreement was like, hey, look, if you have a centrifuge that breaks, they have to find basically an equal replacement. So that's going back 40 plus years, which is very, very, very difficult to do. So at the end of the day, that agreement was fantastic. Not flawless, not without concern, but it really did guide and kind of restrict Iran in a way that we wanted to. And the fact that they agreed to it, I think is an accomplishment that we say thank you to Secretary Kerry and under the President Obama administration. And I'm not saying that to stroke egos or just to say because I'm raised a Democrat, they're Democrats, ergo they're better. That's not what I'm saying. But what they did was an amazing thing. And so what we're doing now is we're saying we're not going to be held accountable. We're not going to be valued or trustworthy to our agreements going forward. That's one risk. But also we're not going to have the same kind of access to Iran on their technology. So I hope that Europe and our partners and friends over there, and they stay our partners and friends, that they're going to maintain their end of the agreement, and we can kind of go through them if need be in this administration or another administration, whenever that happens or when it happens. But it is a tremendous step back for the United States. I really do believe. So one of the things I worked on is when I was with, at the time, Representative Duckworth, now Senator Duckworth, is I got it in the weeds on light water, heavy water, centrifuges, uranium, plutonium, inspections, like as I mentioned several times, the IAEA. It was a great, great deal. Again, now without concerns, but one that definitely favored us. So for the money aspect, long story short, those funds to Iran were, in a sense, already owed to them. We stopped freezing the access to those assets. And so if you think about it, if you look at Iran, if you just Google Iran right now, or when I'm done speaking, look at how many, if you Google Iran and then American bases, you're going to see how many American bases encircle that nation. So we can think of it because we've been told that Iran's bad, they're awful, they're evil. True or not, how would we respond if we're encircled by our enemy? So a lot of this can be prevented. There's a great guy, one of my favorite tour guys named Rick Steves, and he went to Tehran, and while he was sitting in traffic, he was in a cab, and he had an interpreter, of course, and the cabbie in traffic, he goes, death to traffic. And Rick Steves asked, can you say that again? He goes, yes, death to traffic. And he said, what do you mean? He goes, well, when Iranian people are upset, they say death to, insert here. So that really struck me as powerful because it's basically the same thing that we would say or used to say, those damn kids and their lousy rock music. We don't really mean damn those kids to hell. We just mean that it's annoying and it's aggravating. So that was an interesting thing that I learned about Iran through Rick Steves. And so when they say, I'm not saying this without concern, I'm not saying this blindly or some kind of person who's living in the clouds, but the death to America might be somewhat lost in translation. My concern is that we have lost access to Iran, we have lost diplomatic ties, we have lost diplomatic connections, and that will benefit nobody. So by taking a hard line on Iran, it's going to make it more difficult to re-engage with them. It's going to be more difficult to hopefully have another agreement with them if they're willing to do it, but also have one that is as favorable to us and also to them. The fact is they are a major power player in the area, and I think a lot of this has been put in a negative light. I know that they do have involvement in other nations that is not what we want and has not been good. But the more you squeeze, the more you constrict, the more, embargoes, we would call it that, on a nation, the harder and harder and tougher it gets. And so how does anybody, an animal or a human, respond when you kind of get backed in a corner? Not well. And you get more and more defensive. And so yesterday, I think it was yesterday, we saw in the Iranian parliament that they burned an American flag. So what's coming from this? Nothing good. And the fact is they are a major power player in the area. And so the Oliver North thing, with him becoming the head of the NRA, President Trump withdrawing out of the JCPOA / the Iran nuclear deal, is of grave concern, I think, to us. It does undermine what we're trying to accomplish, not only in the area, but also in the global community. So I dig into the weeds on it. So when I talk about the Iran deal, it's not coming from a hypothetical thing. It's coming from actual experience and reading and knowledge for months and months and months and months. So what I would do, just to let you know, is go through all this stuff and write one-page memos for the time Representative Tammy Duckworth. So it was my job to know the ins and outs of this thing. And so my standard for a memo to her or anybody else was to, if you read this memo, you should be able to answer one question with 3 follow-ups. And so that's kind of the level of detail that we got in with that. And that was, again, working with APEC, and that was, again, working with J Street to find something that worked for everybody. And to let everybody know, those are saying Congress needs to approve it. I totally get it. I understand it. But truly, if you look back at the agreement back in 2015, for better or for worse, regardless of how anybody feels about President Obama back then, that the congressional approval was, in a sense, a formality. The deal was already done. It was going through. The part that was going through Congress was a formality. It was already agreed upon, and there was essentially nothing Congress could do. Now, whether people are going to say that's good or bad, that's up for discussion and debate. I'm happy to have that, and I'm happy to be a part of that in Congress in 2019 after we're elected. But that it was a formality. It was already going to happen. It really did put us in a good light. It really did put us in a great position, and it really was not. It was less favorable to Iran, but still not crushing at the same time. So with that, I'll say hi to Tyus from New Mexico, and he's in Congressional District 1. As always, if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to send a message, type me a message. We're here at the office most of the time, 15636 Manchester in Ellisville. Also, the email is mark, M-A-R-K, at markosmac.com. And look me up on Twitter, Mark_Osmac, and we are now on, I think we're on Insta, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and we're going to more and more events. So if I haven't met you yet, I really do hope to. And we're going to put these videos on YouTube so you can check them out at your leisure, as it were. And Gretzky's not here. He's at home basking in the sunshine. But if you can today, even though we're humans, try to find your own personal sunny spot of the carpet and enjoy it for just a little bit. So with that, enjoy this beautiful weather, and I will see you same bat time, same bat channel next Thursday. Thanks so much, and let's go win this thing.